Abilene wasn't known for storms like this. You'd get the usual spring tornado watch, the kind where folks huddle in the hallway and turn up the local news. But this was different. It was early November. The air should have been cool and dry. Instead, it hung heavy like wet cotton, and the sky over Westgate had turned a color Lena Grayson had only seen in old Polaroids, bruised purple with a sick kind of green mixed in. It was around 5:30 when the thunder started, rolling far off at first, just a low mumble like some old man grumbling in his sleep. By 6, the sky was flashing like a busted strobe light, and the trees outside were bending like they wanted to crawl away. Lena was 15, skinny, tall and pale in the way small-town girls always think is a curse until they grow up and realize it made them look like ghosts. Her parents, Cliff and Mary, had gone up to Wichita Falls for a funeral. Not a close relative, just some great aunt on her mother's side that Lena had met once at a barbecue when she was 8. They left that morning, her mom promising to be back by nightfall. "Storm's just passing," her dad had said before kissing her on the forehead. "You'll be fine, sweetheart, just keep the doors locked." She was fine for the first few hours. She microwaved a Hot Pocket, half-watched some reality show and curled up on the couch with her old tabby cat Gremlin, purring like a busted engine beside her. The rain started around 7:30, hard, like buckets from the sky. Wind slammed into the windows, making the whole house creak. Lena tried to act like it didn't bother her, like she hadn't already turned on every light in the house and double-checked the locks twice. Around 8, the power went out. Everything blinked, off at once. The TV, the lights, the buzzing refrigerator. Even the hum of the AC died, leaving a vacuum of silence so sharp she could hear her own breath. Gremlin's ears twitched and he bolted under the couch. Lena stood there in the sudden dark, heart doing double time. The only sound now was rain hammering the roof like a million fingernails. She found the flashlight in the kitchen drawer, the big black one her dad always joked could double as a club. It flickered on with a weak yellow beam. Batteries going, she thought. Of course. She tried not to panic. She lit a few candles in the living room, turned her phone brightness up, and texted her mom. No response. Probably out of signal range, or their phones died. She told herself not to be stupid. That was when she heard the first whisper. It wasn't loud, just soft, barely there, like someone talking through a pillow. She froze, holding the flashlight out in front of her like a sword. The sound had come from above, directly above. The attic. She told herself it was the storm. Wind in the eaves. Old insulation shifting. Mice, maybe. They had mice once the year before, but her dad set traps and swore he got them all. She stood under the attic door in the hallway ceiling for a long time, not breathing, waiting. Nothing. Then, just as she turned away, she heard it again. A whisper, like breath pushed through cracked lips. Lena. She stopped cold. It had said her name. Her blood turned to ice. She couldn't move, couldn't even blink. It was impossible. It had to be in her head. Maybe she imagined it. Thunder boomed in the distance, shaking the windows. Gremlin hissed from under the couch. She forced herself to move back to the living room, where the candles danced on the end tables like nervous children. She sat down, curled up again, flashlight still in her hand. She didn't look at the ceiling. She didn't want to know what might be looking back. Half an hour passed. Maybe more. Her phone was at 22%. She thought about calling someone, but who? Her parents were hours away. She didn't want to sound crazy. Just as she was starting to doze off, wrapped in a blanket like a burrito of fear, she heard it again. "Lena, I know you're awake." She shot up. The voice was clearer now, still whispered, still distant, but unmistakably real. It came from the attic again. She looked up and saw it, the square outline in the hallway ceiling, the pull string dangling like a noose. She knew she should call the cops. But something deep in her gut said no. Not because she didn't trust them, but because she knew whatever was whispering up there wasn't something a cop could handcuff. She crept into the hallway. The flashlight flickered, almost went out, then steadied. She stared at the attic door. "Lena, you think too loud." Her breath hitched. She ran all the way to the kitchen, slammed the door, locked it, pressed her back to it, hyperventilating. She didn't scream. She couldn't. It felt like screaming would make it more real. She slumped to the floor, flashlight rolling away across the linoleum. Gremlin was nowhere in sight. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She yanked it out, hope swelling, but it was just a notification. Low battery, 10%. A whisper came from the ceiling vent above her head. "You wonder what I look like." Her skin crawled. She bolted from the kitchen, grabbed the flashlight again, and ran to the garage. Locked that door too. Sat with her back against the washing machine, knees pulled to her chest. The rain slowed around midnight. The thunder grew faint. But the whispers didn't stop. They came and went, always from above. Always saying things she hadn't said aloud. "You miss your grandma. You wish Tyler liked you back. You hate how your mom talks to you when she's drinking." Every secret, every buried thought, whispered from the attic. And worse, the voice was changing. It started sounding like her, like a twisted version of herself, tired and mocking. By 3 a.m., the flashlight was nearly dead. She was shaking, cold, barely able to keep her eyes open. At some point, she passed out. She woke to light. The power was back on. Morning light bled in through the windows. Everything looked normal. Silent. Calm. Like none of it had happened. She wandered the house in a daze, found Gremlin asleep in the laundry basket like nothing was wrong. Her phone had no missed calls, just a dead battery. She never told her parents. Not that day, not for years. But from that night on, she heard the whispers whenever she was alone. Not loud, not constant, but always there. Like someone living in the walls, just waiting for her to be quiet. And every time she walks past the attic door, she swears she sees the strings swaying, just a little, as if someone was waiting up there, thinking her thoughts, waiting to whisper them back. Midland didn't have much to offer a 12-year-old boy during winter break. The nights came fast and cold. The air smelled like dry dirt and oil, and the local mall was a ghost town even on weekends. The year was 2004, and kids still played. With action figures, still taped movies off the TV, still believed in weird stuff. Because weird things hadn't been pushed out by screens yet. Not completely anyway. Luke Martinez had been left alone before, but never overnight. His mom worked nights at the hospital, pulling double shifts now that rent had gone up again, and his dad had left before Luke learned long division. Normally, his older cousin Jay came over to babysit, but Jay had caught the flu. So it was just Luke, a ham sandwich, a stack of old Goosebumps books, and the creaky old duplex on Grant Avenue that smelled faintly of wet drywall and lemon fabuloso. The house had bad bones. You could feel it in the way the floors shifted when you walked, or how the vents moaned when the heater kicked on. And at night, it settled. That's what his mom always said. "Old houses settle, mijo. It's just the wood moving. Don't let it scare you." Luke wasn't scared, not really. Not until the knocking started. It was just past 9:30 and he was in bed, under his Power Rangers blanket, reading Say Cheese and Die for the third time. The wind outside was howling like a mad dog, but inside, the house was quiet, still. His room was small. Just a twin bed, a wooden dresser, and a poster of Pikachu peeling at the corner from old tape. The hallway light was on, casting a sliver of orange glow under his door. Then, knock. He looked up. Just one knock. Soft, like a single tap on the wall behind his headboard. He froze. Waited. Nothing. He sat up, listening. The wind hissed again. Probably just the pipes, or the neighbor. The walls were thin. You could hear everything through them. Fights, toilets, dogs barking. It was probably nothing. Then, knock knock. 2 taps this time. Sharp, deliberate. He turned toward the wall. It was the east wall, the one that connected to the unit next door. But that side had been empty since the old man who lived there died. In August, the blinds had stayed drawn ever since. Luke cleared his throat. "Hello," he said. Silence. He stared at the wall for a long time. Then, on impulse, he said, "If someone's there, knock once for no, twice for yes." A long pause. Knock, knock. He almost dropped his book. His chest tightened. That wasn't the pipes. That wasn't wind. That was a reply. He sat cross-legged on the bed, staring at the wall like it might answer back again. "Are you a person?" he asked, his voice shaky. Knock. "No." "Are you in the walls?" Knock, knock. "Yes." His hands trembled. The space between the walls wasn't big, maybe 1.5 feet wide, just beams, pipes, old insulation. No one could crawl in there. "Are you a ghost?" Knock. "No." He didn't ask again for a long time. Just sat there, heart pounding, breathing shallow. Finally, he whispered, "Do you want to hurt me?" Silence. Then, knock. No. He felt a weird kind of relief. Like he was talking to something that meant no harm. Maybe just lonely. Like him. He grabbed a pencil from his desk and started writing questions on an old notebook. Yes or no. He'd read the question out loud. Then wait. The knocks came sure and steady like Morse code from a place just behind reality. "Are you a kid?" Knock, knock. "Yes." "Are you stuck?" Knock, knock. "Yes." "Did someone put you there?" Knock. "No." That one stumped him. "How could you be stuck if no one put you there? Are you dead?" A longer pause. Then, knock. "No." He put the pencil down. He couldn't sleep. He didn't even try. Around midnight, he asked if the thing in the wall had a name. "Can I call you something?" Knock, knock. "Yes." "Tyler?" Knock. "No." "Marco?" Knock. "No." He went through every boy's name he could think of, one by one. When he got to Nathan, the reply was different. Knock, knock, knock. 3 knocks. "What's that mean?" he asked. No answer. He didn't know what time he fell asleep, but it was sometime after 3 in the morning. He woke up to sunlight on his face and a dried trail of drool on his cheek. He bolted up and looked at the wall. Quiet. Normal. No knocks. No feeling of being watched. That night, it started again. Right on time. Around 9:30, knock, knock. "Hi," Luke whispered. He kept playing the game, night after night. Knock once for no, twice for yes. Sometimes 3 knocks, sometimes a weird scratching sound, like tiny fingernails dragging along wood. He never told. His mom didn't want her to think he was crazy. Then one night he asked a different kind of question. "Do you ever leave the wall?" Knock, knock. "Yes." His throat went dry. "Do you come out while I'm sleeping?" Knock, no. "Do you want me to let you out?" Long pause. Knock, knock. "Yes." He stared at the drywall. He imagined taking a hammer to it, cracking it open like a soft-boiled egg, and finding. He didn't finish the thought. Instead, he said, "Where's the door?" A pause. Then, knock, knock on the wall behind his closet. He pulled the door open, moved his clothes aside. The back wall was plain drywall, but when he looked closer, he saw something scratched into it. A circle, not big, like the size of a frisbee, and inside it lines, weird shapes. He didn't touch it. Not yet. "Did you draw that?" Knock, knock. "Yes." "What happens if I open it?" Knock, knock. "Yes." That didn't make sense. He asked again. "What happens if I open it? Is it bad?" Knock. "No. Will I see you?" Knock, knock. "Yes." He went and got his dad's old screwdriver from the junk drawer, came back to the closet, heart hammering so loud he thought it would wake the whole block. He chipped at the drywall. Little flakes at first, then more. It came off easy, like it had been softened somehow. After 10 minutes, he peeled back the last layer and stared into a black round hole like a tunnel, no wind, no smell, just stillness. He leaned in. "Nathan?" he whispered. No sound. No knock. Then, from inside the hole, knock knock. He smiled, nervous but kind of excited. "I'm coming in," he said, half joking. He leaned closer, peered into the hole, and something reached out. Not fast. Not aggressive. Just slow and cold and pale as paper. A hand with 2 long fingers, nails like old chalk. It brushed his cheek gently, almost like a mother waking her son for school. Luke screamed. He scrambled back, hit his head on the dresser, fell to the floor sobbing. He didn't sleep that night. When his mom came home and saw the hole, she thought someone broke in. Called the police. They found nothing. No prints, no signs of forced entry. But the hole, it was gone. No one could explain how an entire patch of wall disappeared and then came back solid the next day like nothing happened. Luke never played the knock game again. But sometimes, when the wind howls just right and the hallway is quiet, he hears it. Knock knock. Waiting. Always waiting. After her hip surgery, Evelyn Cade was told to stay off her feet as much as possible. "Let the healing come to you," the surgeon said. "You're 81, Mrs. Cade. You don't bounce back like a rubber ball anymore." She laughed politely. She'd always had a sense of humor even when life tried to beat it out of her. She'd lived through 2 husbands, breast cancer, a stroke, and the death of her only child. A bum hip wasn't going to be the thing to take her out. Her niece, Donna, dropped her off at her home in Bastrop County with a few weeks' worth of groceries, pain meds, and frozen casseroles. "Call me if you need anything," Donna had said. Though, Evelyn could tell by her tone she hoped that call wouldn't come. People mean well, Evelyn thought. But they get tired of the old folks. The house was a small 1-story ranch style from the 60s, with yellow siding and a sunken front porch that always tilted a little left after the rain. Evelyn had lived in it for over 40 years, and it had always creaked like an old ship in the night. But she knew its creaks. She knew which ones came from the wind, which from the heat expanding the boards, and which from the old plumbing lines that still groaned in the winter. The sound she heard that first night was none of those things. She was in her recliner in the den, wrapped in a thick quilt, watching the tail end of a rerun of Murder, She wrote when it came, soft at first, a faint shh, like fabric being dragged across gravel. From beneath her, she muted the television and listened. Nothing. Then again, shh. Then a pause. Then another sound, thump, like something bumping against the underside of the floorboards. The house was pier and beam, lifted a few feet above, the dirt. In all her years there, she'd occasionally heard raccoons or armadillos down there, maybe even a snake once. But this sound, it was too slow, too heavy. It didn't skitter, it crawled. She shifted her weight, feeling a pull in her stitched hip, and reached for her walker. The next day she told herself it had just been painkillers making her loopy. That night, she heard it again. Only this time it started in the kitchen and made its way slowly, deliberately toward the den. Shh. Pause. Shh. Pause. It sounded like something dragging itself forward with elbows. Each night it returned, a little closer, a little bolder. Sometimes it bumped into things under the house, pipes, joists, and sometimes it paused right beneath her feet and just waited. The 4th night, she yelled through the floor, "Get on out of here, you damn thing, go bother someone else." No response, no scurrying, just silence. Then the sound resumed. That night, she slept with the lamp on. A few days later, she called her niece. "You sure there ain't something dead under my house?" Evelyn asked. Donna sighed. "I'll send Toby to check it out." Toby was Donna's boyfriend, a mechanic who drank too much Lone Star and smelled like gasoline. He showed up with a flashlight and a 6-pack, went under the house grumbling, and came out 20 minutes later with dirt on his jeans and a weird look on his face. "Didn't see nothing," he muttered. "Heard something, though. Could be a possum. Big one." "It ain't a possum," Evelyn said. He didn't ask what she meant, just cracked open a beer, gave her a weird smile, and said, You need anything, you call Donna, all right? Didn't come back. Evelyn stopped watching TV, stopped sleeping much. Her eyes got dark underneath and her hands trembled a little more than usual. She started to believe it wasn't just crawling anymore, it was listening. When she shuffled, across the floor it followed. When she sat, it settled. One night, she dropped a spoon in the kitchen. It clattered to the floor, and from the other side of the linoleum, she heard a noise, an unmistakable, deliberate sound. Tap, tap, like fingers. She called the sheriff's office. The next morning, trying her best not to sound crazy. "Ma'am, it's likely a wild animal," the deputy said over the phone. "We can send someone by next week to check it out." She hung up before they could finish. That night, Evelyn didn't sleep at all. Her body ached, her hip throbbed, her ears rang from listening so hard, and from beneath the floor, it came, again, slow, crawling, pulling itself across the dirt, thudding softly against the boards. It stopped beneath her bed. She didn't move. She just stared at the ceiling, her throat dry, hands clenched into fists under the quilt. Then came the whisper. Not loud, not clear, like wind moving over broken glass. Lynn. She didn't scream. She wanted to. But the sound stole the breath from her lungs. The next day she called the church, asked if Pastor Jim could come by and say a prayer over the house. He showed up with his wife and a half-used bottle of anointing oil. He didn't believe her either, but he prayed, and that made her feel better, for a while. That night, the whisper came again. Lynn, I'm coming. She cried for the first time in 10 years. Then, the night before the storm rolled through, something changed. It didn't just crawl, it scratched, clawed, pounded. She could hear the foundation shaking. The walls creaked like something was trying to push up from below. She called 911. They said they'd send someone, but no one came. The storm hit hard, wind like freight trains, rain like machine gun fire. The power went out just after midnight. The house went dark. The temperature dropped. And the thing beneath the floor came alive. It screamed. It wasn't a sound from this world. It was wet and dry at the same time, like a cat being drowned while laughing. The house shuddered with it. Evelyn clutched her walker, dragging herself toward the hallway. Her hip flared with pain and she nearly collapsed. Then the floor bulged beneath her. Boards cracked. Something was pushing through. She screamed, fell, crawled to the bathroom, slammed the door, locked it, huddled in the corner, crying. The floor, in the hallway, split open. She heard it, heard the dragging, heard the wet sucking sounds of something pulling its heavy, shapeless body into her home. She heard it breathing, she heard it say her name. Lynn. Then, quiet. The power came back an hour later. The house was still. She didn't open the bathroom door until dawn. The hallway floor was intact. No cracks, no dirt, no sign of damage. But the quilt from her recliner was gone. So was the spoon she dropped. So was the photograph of her husband that had sat on the end table for 30 years. Gone. She didn't tell anyone. What would she say? But now, every night as she lays in bed with the lamp on and her eyes wide, she hears it, a single sound from beneath the floor. Drag, drag, pause. Still coming, still getting closer, and she knows, deep in her bones, one night soon, it will find a way in. When Nora moved into the house on Arrowbriar Lane, she wasn't looking for a fresh start. She was just looking for silence. Divorced, mid-30s, no kids. She'd left a job in downtown Houston that had bled her dry for almost a decade. The new place wasn't fancy. 3 bedrooms, beige siding, cheap tile floors, but the rent was low and it was in the suburbs where everything was slower, quieter. The silence was what she wanted. Until it wasn't. The house had come mostly unfurnished except for a few things the landlord had never picked up. A rusting grill in the backyard, an old treadmill that didn't work, and a landline telephone mounted on the kitchen wall. Deep, red, the color of blood drying in sunlight. It didn't fit the rest of the house at all. Looked like it belonged in a 1970s office or a Cold War fallout shelter. She unplugged it on the first day. Not just from the wall jack, she cut the cord with scissors. Because who the hell uses a landline anymore? Still, she left it hanging on the wall. The first time it rang was on the 5th night. Nora had just brushed her teeth and was heading to bed when she heard it, a sharp, shrill brrring that echoed off the tile. She froze at the foot of the stairs, staring toward the dark kitchen. It rang again. And again. Impossible. She had cut the line. She walked into the kitchen slowly, her bare feet sticking to the cool tile. The red phone sat there on the wall, its curled cord limp, its plastic handset vibrating just slightly each time it rang. She picked it up. Silence. No dial tone. No static. Just nothing. She hung it back up and stood there for a long time, watching. It like it might do something. It didn't. Not that night. The next night it rang again. Same time, midnight on the dot. This time she didn't answer. It rang 11 times and stopped. She stood in the kitchen afterward, breathing hard. Heart pounding in her ears. The house didn't feel so quiet anymore. The kind of silence that sets in after something unnatural happens. It was too loud in its own way. She searched online, looking up the number associated with her address. Nothing. The landlord didn't answer her email. The phone company said the line had been disconnected years ago. Just remove it. Her friend Jenna told her over lunch the next day. Rip it off the wall. But Nora didn't. Something about it made her hands sweat when she got too close. She couldn't explain why. It felt like, if she touched it again, she'd be agreeing to something. Like the rules of whatever was going on would change. That Friday night, she poured herself a glass of wine and stayed up to wait. The red phone rang at exactly 12 QAM. This time, the lights flickered. This time, the dog next door started barking and didn't stop until 12:11. She didn't answer. The next morning, she found muddy handprints on her front window. Not fingerprints. Handprints. Too large to be human, too narrow. 5 long, splayed digits as if the hands had been stretched. She washed them off without thinking. Like if she didn't give them importance, they wouldn't matter. By the following week, the phone wasn't the only thing acting strange. Sometimes the fridge light wouldn't come on. Sometimes it would turn off after she opened the door. Sometimes the TV switched channels all by itself, always to static. Sometimes she'd come downstairs and find the back door unlocked, even though she remembered locking it. But always. The phone rang at midnight. She recorded it on her phone. One night it didn't catch the sound, just her staring, pale, breathing heavy, while the red phone vibrated on the wall behind her, clearly ringing in the footage. But the audio, completely blank. Then on the 11th night, it rang longer than usual. She counted 33 rings. Before it stopped, she unplugged her Wi-Fi router after that, took the batteries out of her smoke detectors, stopped answering texts. The house became a tomb and she let it. She didn't want anything connected anymore, nothing to reach in or out. But the phone kept ringing. Then one night, after the ringing stopped, it spoke. She didn't answer it. She hadn't touched it. But the receiver lifted off the hook by itself and a voice came through. Low, hoarse, scraping like gravel down a metal pipe. "Nora," it whispered. She screamed, ran outside in her pajamas and slept in her car with the dome light on. The next morning, she found the phone off the hook, laying on the kitchen floor, its cord stretched far beyond what it should have allowed. She called Jenna, begged her to come over. They sat at the kitchen table that night, both staring at the phone. Jenna was skeptical. Until midnight, the phone rang. Jenna went pale. "You said it wasn't plugged in," she whispered. "It's not," Nora said. Jenna left 10 minutes later. She never came back. The landlord finally replied to her email 2 days later. His message was short. Did you answer it? No greeting. No signature. She didn't respond. The next night, the phone rang again and again. And then, someone knocked on the front door. She froze in the hallway, staring toward the entrance. Another knock. She peeked through the peephole. No one there. But when she turned back, the phone was off the hook again. This time, the cord was wrapped around the base like it had twisted on its own. The voice came back. I'm close. The next day, she ripped the phone off the wall, cut the wires again, smashed it with a hammer, took the pieces to the dump 5 miles away. She slept that night for the first time in weeks, until midnight. The phone rang from under the kitchen sink. She opened the cabinet slowly, her stomach rolling with nausea and dread. There it was, the red phone. Whole again, ringing. She ran, got in her car, drove until sunrise. When she came back, the house was still. No phone on the wall, nothing under the sink, no evidence it had ever been there. She packed a suitcase and left. A week later, she saw a listing online. Cozy 3-bed home in Houston suburb, quiet, great price, perfect for new families. Landline included. In the photo of the kitchen, clear as day, was a red phone mounted on the wall, still ringing. The house sat at the end of a gravel road just outside Waco, long enough away from town that you couldn't hear cars or people, but close enough that you got Amazon deliveries if the weather was good. Fiona Jacobs was 12 when her parents pulled her out of school. Her mom said it was because Fiona was too sensitive and the other kids were too mean. Her dad said public schools were godless cattle pens and filled her days with Bible readings and long stretches of silence. It wasn't bad, not really. The house was big enough. 2 stories, built sometime in the 60s. A little weather-worn, always drafty. But Fiona had her own room, a shelf full of books and enough space to be alone when she wanted, and she wanted to be alone a lot. Because Fiona noticed things most people didn't. Like how the wind sometimes whispered her name when she stood too close to the woods out back. Or how the kitchen clock ticked 1 second off from every other clock in the house. Or how the hallway light, right at the top of the stairs, flickered at night. Not like a bulb going bad, not random. It was rhythmic, like it was trying to say something. At first she thought it was just her imagination. She was homeschooled, sure, but she wasn't stupid. She'd read plenty of books, including the ones her dad didn't know about, hidden under her mattress or borrowed from Jenna down the road. Books about codes and mysteries and messages hidden in plain sight. One rainy Thursday afternoon, the power flickered during a storm. All the lights went out, and then suddenly the hallway light, just that one, clicked on, and then it blinked. 3 short flashes. Pause. 3 long flashes. Pause. 3 short flashes. Fiona sat straight up in Betzos. She didn't tell her parents. Her dad would quote scripture and her mom would cry and say maybe they needed to pray more. Instead, she started watching the light every night. Sometimes it blinked random patterns. Sometimes it repeated things. Always at night. Always when the house was quiet and the wind had stilled. She Googled Morse code and started writing down what she saw. It didn't make sense at first. Snippets. Words out of order. Hello. Cold. Scared. Floor. Over the next 2 weeks, the messages got clearer. Still here. Not gone. Below you. She made the mistake of answering one night. Whispered it out loud. Who are you? The light blinked, quick and desperate. Hungry. Trapped. Basement. Their house didn't have a basement. That's what she told herself. That's what her dad told her too, years ago, when she asked why the door under the stairs was nailed shut. He said it was just crawl space. But the next night, the light didn't blink in Morse, it just turned on and stayed on, all night. When she woke up in the morning, the nails on the door under the stairs were gone. Just gone. The door was still closed, but not locked, not sealed. That day, Fiona didn't eat, didn't speak. She kept glancing down the hall, staring at the door every time she passed it. It felt like something was watching her back. She waited until midnight, pulled out her notepad, waited for the light. It blinked once, then again. Slow, deliberate. Come, please, help, and then one long blink, not Morse, just long, like someone holding their breath. She crept down the stairs in socks, holding a flashlight. The house was cold, colder than usual. The kind of cold that doesn't come from bad insulation, the kind that settles in your bones like it belongs there. The door under the stairs creaked open when she touched it, just a crack. A warm, rotten smell hit her, wet earth and mold and something sweet underneath it, like rotting fruit. The flashlight flickered. She clicked it twice. "Are you there?" she whispered. From the crack in the door, she heard something move. Not a whisper, not a breeze, something alive, something heavy dragging across concrete. She dropped the flashlight, ran back upstairs. The next morning, the door was closed again. But something had come out. There were muddy prints across the kitchen tile. But they weren't footprints, they were handprints, dragging, long and narrow, fingernails scratching tile. Her dad asked if she'd spilled something. She shook her head. Her mom wiped them up, humming hymns under her breath. That night, the hallway light blinked once, then never came on again. She waited 3 nights for nothing. Then, on the 5th night, she woke to blinking. Not the hallway light this time, her bedside lamp. It clicked softly. "Morse, I see you." Then her laptop screen turned on, blinking white square in the middle of the black screen. "I'm out." That was the last message she translated, because the night after that, the blinking stopped, and something knocked on her bedroom door. Once, then twice, then slowly turned the handle. When they first moved into the house on the edge of Denton, it felt like a fresh start. A bigger place, a yard for the kids to run, and most importantly, a guest room that was tucked away at the very end of the hall. The kind of room that seemed to wait for company, waiting for strangers to pass through and fill the emptiness with their presence. Maria had always been a little sensitive to spaces, a little more aware than her husband, Alex. He was the practical one. Everything had a purpose, a place, a reason. She felt things. Sometimes the air in a room would feel heavy, or the floor would creak in a rhythm that didn't belong. And the guest room at the end of the hall was one of those places. The moment she stepped in to clean it, she noticed it. The air was colder there even in the middle of summer. It wasn't a draft, not from a window or an air conditioning vent. It was just cold, bone-chillingly cold. She'd chalked it up to an old house settling, maybe some kind of air circulation issue. But when the movers came, they had the same reaction. "Hell, it's like a freezer in here," the lead mover, Bill, said, his breath misting in the air despite the heat outside. He laughed awkwardly, but Maria couldn't help feeling the chill creeping down her spine. They didn't use the room much after that, at least not for guests. They kept it locked. The door at the end of the hall became a kind of forgotten place, a room that existed but wasn't spoken of, like the uncle who only came around on holidays but nobody ever really talked to. But as the weeks passed, something began to change. The room seemed to grow more restless. The cold intensified like a constant presence, an unwelcome guest of its own. Maria began to notice that the door would rattle on its hinges at night, even though no one was there. She thought it was the wind, maybe. Or maybe the house was shifting. Alex didn't notice anything at all, of course. He was always in his study or out in the garage doing important things. One night, Maria decided to ignore the unsettling feeling and leave. The door unlocked. She made sure to leave the light on in the hallway just in case. But in the morning, when she went to check, the door was wide open. She froze, her heart skipping a beat. She'd locked it the night before, she was sure of it. She always did, just in case. But the door was open. The room was exactly as it had been. Nothing was out of place. No one had been in there. But the air was colder than ever. It felt like she was walking into a tomb. It clung to her skin, sinking into her bones like it was never going to let her go. It wasn't just cold in the room, it was colder inside her too. A chill that started in her chest and spread outward, gripping her heart until she thought it might freeze solid. She didn't tell Alex. He wouldn't understand. But that night, she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that door at the end of the hall, slowly creaking open, as though something inside was trying to get out. Then, around 3:30 a.m., she heard it. A soft scraping sound, like something dragging across the floor. Very faint at first, but louder and clearer as it went on. The sound of something slowly dragging itself toward the door. She pulled the blanket tighter around her, trying to keep the terror out of her mind. But the sound continued. A scraping, like nails on wood, coming closer. The room was colder than ever. Then, it stopped. Fingers gripping the edge of the bed, Maria listened. Absolute silence. The house felt frozen in time. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she forced herself to get out of bed. She moved quietly, so quietly, as if making any sound would summon whatever was in that room. The door at the end of the hall was ajar again. The cold air leaked out, rushing into the hallway like a fog. Maria walked toward it slowly, heart hammering in her chest. She reached for the handle, her fingers trembling, and pulled the door open the rest of the way. The room was empty, but the air was so cold it almost felt like a presence, like something had been waiting for her to come. Inside, something that didn't belong there, something that had been locked away for far too long. Her breath came out in a cloud, white against the oppressive blackness of the room. She turned back to the hallway, but before she could step away, something caught her eye. On the floor, near the edge of the bed, was a trail of dark, sticky-looking marks. They led from the corner of the room, from where the wall met the floor, all the way to the door. Maria bent down to get a closer look. It wasn't dust. It wasn't dirt. It was something worse. Something that had been dragged. Something that had bled, but not from a wound. She screamed, the sound ringing out in the silence of the house. Alex came running, his face drawn with concern. But when he stepped into the room, the marks were gone. The cold air had lifted. The room was as it always had been, still, silent and unremarkable. Alex stood in the doorway, frowning at her. "What's wrong, Maria?" he asked. "It's just a room. We've been over this before. The house is old. It's settling, that's all." Maria swallowed hard, her throat dry. I can't explain it. There's something in here, Alex. There's something in that room." Alex didn't answer. He didn't need to. He already knew. He just didn't want to face it. It was late in the afternoon when Ben first noticed the figures. He was just about to head inside from the porch when he caught the movement, a shadow shifting between the rows of cotton. At first, he thought it was one of the dogs, maybe running, off again, doing what they always did when they were left alone. But then the shadow stopped. Ben squinted, trying to make sense of it, but the field seemed endless. The cotton rows stretching out like a dark, waving sea beneath the overcast sky. He couldn't make out much more than the shapes, tall and lanky, moving between the plants in unnatural silence. He tried to call out to the dogs to make sure they were okay, but his throat tightened, his voice barely rising above the breeze. The house behind him, his family's house, stood quiet and still. A large two-story home, faded from years of sun and dust, windows dark like hollow eyes. There was something off about it today. Maybe it was the air, too thick and heavy, or maybe it was just the fact that no one else was around. Ben's parents had gone into town earlier that afternoon, leaving him with the promise they'd be back before dark. The dogs were with them, but now, the house felt empty, lonelier than usual. Ben turned back toward the cotton field. The shadows were still there, but they weren't moving anymore. They were just standing, watching. Ben's pulse quickened. He felt a familiar, gnawing sensation crawl up his spine. He was no stranger to the field, the land his family farmed had been in, his blood for generations. But there was something wrong about it today. Something he couldn't put his finger on. He should go inside. He should lock the door, hide under his bed, wait for his parents to return. But for some reason his legs didn't listen. They carried him toward the fence line, where the cotton met the barren dirt, his sneakers kicking up dust with every step. As he got closer to the field, he could make out the figures more clearly now. They were tall, too tall, and their movements were jerky, almost as if they weren't human at all. His breath caught in his throat when he saw that one of them wasn't standing anymore. It had dropped to all fours, crawling through the cotton, like an animal, its hands scraping against the dry earth with a sound that sent chills down his spine. Ben stopped dead in his tracks. He wanted to shout, to call out to his parents, to run back inside, but his voice was caught in his chest. The field had gone dead silent, the wind holding its breath, and the figures, those unnatural, elongated shapes, had stopped moving. They were still watching him, and then from behind him came the sound of a door creaking open. Ben spun around, heart leaping into his throat. The house, his family's house, wasn't empty anymore. There was someone standing in the doorway, someone tall and thin, just like the shadows in the field. His heart hammered in his chest as he stared at the figure. He couldn't make out its features, just the shape, too tall, too thin, its head angled in a way that didn't look right. "Ben," the voice said, the words soft, hollow. It was his mother's voice, but it wasn't. It was a mimicry, a mockery of what she would sound like if she were standing there. The way it slipped, through the air cold and wrong, made his stomach turn. "Come inside, Ben, it's safe. Safe." He couldn't move. His body was frozen, rooted to the spot. The air around him felt thick, suffocating. His gaze flicked back to the figures in the cotton field. They had started to move again, but now they weren't alone. There were more of them, creeping from between the rows, crawling like insects, their eyes shining in the fading light like something out of a nightmare. Ben felt the world tilt. His breath quickened and his hands trembled as he backed away from the house, from the figure in the doorway. He couldn't explain it, but he knew something was wrong. Something was horribly, horribly wrong. The dogs. Where were the dogs? His legs finally started to work again, and he turned, sprinting back toward the fence line, toward the safety of the barn. The wind howled in his ears and the sky grew darker, the cotton field around him a shadowy labyrinth of death. The figures were closing in, their faces now visible in the dimming light, skin stretched tight over skulls, eyes wide and empty, like they had been waiting for him. A dog barked somewhere in the distance, one of the dogs. His breath hitched in his throat, but it wasn't a bark of warning. It was a sound of something trapped, something desperate, coming from the farthest edge of the field. He kept running, his heart pounding like a drum. The barn was so close now. He could see the open door ahead. But then, something shifted behind him. The world seemed to stutter. The air chilled and the shadows in the field seemed to stretch toward him impossibly long, their hands reaching, pulling, dragging. He heard a voice whisper in the wind, but it wasn't his mother anymore. It wasn't anyone he recognized. "Ben," the voice called again, sweet and low, like the sound of a lullaby. "It's all right. Come home." But Ben didn't stop. He didn't turn back. He dove into the barn just as the darkness swallowed the last of the light. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of hay and old leather. He slammed the door shut behind him, gasping for breath, his heart racing like it might burst. He crouched in the corner, trembling, staring out the cracks in the barn's wooden walls. The figures were still out there watching, but they weren't watching the house anymore, they were watching him. The dogs never came back, neither did his parents, and the shadows never left the cotton field. The radio had been there for years, tucked away in the far corner of the attic. Dusty, forgotten, and silent. It was one of those old, bulky things, a relic from another time. A console radio with dark wood paneling, gold knobs, and a static-filled dial that never quite tuned into the stations it was supposed to. Her father had inherited it from his mother, who had passed it down from her mother before that. There were rumors about it being haunted, of course, but none of that seemed to matter when it was tucked away in the attic where no one bothered to go. But it wasn't just the radio that was odd. It was the man in the recordings. Maggie hadn't thought about it in years, not since her father passed and her mother sold the house, moving her family to a smaller place near San Angelo. She had only just turned 20 when they'd moved. She was young, still uncertain, and the only thing that really stood out about the old house was its history. Stories of strange noises, of things moving in the night, of whispers that came from places no one could explain. The old radio, though, had been left behind, stored away in the attic without a second thought. It was nothing more than a forgotten piece of family history. But when Maggie moved back into the house, something changed. It was the dead of winter when she first noticed it. The snow had settled on the ground, thick and heavy, the world outside her windows an endless stretch of white. The silence was nearly absolute, broken only by the sound of the wind howling through the eaves, rattling the shutters as if it had a mind of its own. Maggie had spent the evening cleaning, sorting through the boxes her parents had left behind when she came across the old radio. It looked almost sad, sitting in the attic as though it had been waiting for someone to notice. She hadn't planned on it, but for some reason she dragged it downstairs and plugged it in. The moment she turned the dial, the static hit her ears like a slap in the face. She turned it back and forth, trying to find a station, but all she could hear was that same maddening hum, like 1,000 voices speaking all at once. But then somewhere deep in the static, something else emerged. Faint but unmistakable. A voice. It was low at first, too low to make out the words, but it soon grew louder and clearer. A sermon, Maggie whispered to herself. Unsure why, she felt a shiver crawl up her spine. She'd never heard a sermon on the radio before, certainly not from a station that didn't even seem to exist. The voice was warm, familiar, like someone who had been talking to her in her sleep. It was a man's voice, deep, rich, and comforting, to seek the Lord with a humble heart. And when the Lord asks you to repent, you must answer. You must atone for your sins. Maggie sat there staring at the radio, her fingers frozen on the dial. The voice continued, its words full of weight, as if each syllable was meant to reach deep into her soul. She felt an unease build in her chest, a growing pressure as though the walls of the house were closing in on her. But what truly unsettled her, what made the hair on the back of her neck stand up, was the name that followed. Maggie Miller, the voice said, the words crisp and clear in the silence of the room. She froze, her heart stopping in her chest, her breath hitched in her throat. The radio buzzed and crackled as the voice continued. You have sinned against the Lord, Maggie. You have taken what was not yours. You have betrayed those who loved you. Your sin is heavy, and you must seek redemption. Maggie's blood ran cold. The voice, the words. It sounded like someone who knew her, like someone who had been watching her for a long time. She scrambled for the power button, but before she could reach it, the voice grew, louder, more insistent. The sin of greed, of selfishness, of betrayal. You must atone, Maggie Miller, or the consequences will be dire. Come to the altar and repent. The voice was no longer calm. It was harsh, accusing. Maggie felt a suffocating pressure, like the walls were closing in, pressing her chest with each word. Her thoughts raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. But there was no sense to it, only fear, only the certainty that she was being judged. She slammed her hand down on the radio, cutting off the voice mid-sentence. The room fell silent once again, the only sound the beating of her own heart. Her palms were slick with sweat. She felt dizzy, her head spinning as if the world had suddenly turned upside down. What had just happened? Maggie stared at the radio, her breath shallow. Her hands were trembling. She thought she had imagined it, but the feeling in her gut, the tightness in her chest, told her otherwise. The voice, whatever it was, had known things about her, things no one else could know. She didn't sleep that night. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming, every creak of the house, every gust of wind setting her on edge. She spent the next few days trying to convince herself that it was just her imagination, that she had been tired and the radio was just old and faulty. But no matter how hard she tried, the voice, Father Grady's voice, kept replaying in her mind. And then one night she couldn't take it anymore. She returned to the attic, pulled the radio from its hiding place, and plugged it back in, her hands shaking with dread. But this time it wasn't static that filled the air. This time the voice came without hesitation. "The Lord forgives, Maggie, but you must repent. You cannot hide from your sin. You cannot run." The radio crackled and Maggie felt the walls of the house seem to close in on her. The voice spoke again, softer now, as though it was coming from right behind her. "The price is steep, Maggie Miller. The price is steep." She didn't know who Father Grady was. She didn't know how the old preacher's voice had found its way into her home. But she knew one thing for certain. She had made a mistake coming back to this house. And now, whatever had been waiting in the attic, whatever had been playing those sermons, wasn't going to let her leave without a price. The voice echoed in her ears, as cold as the winter night outside. "And now, Maggie, you must pay." The house was quiet when Ellie came home, just like it always was. Her mother worked late and her father was hardly ever around, too busy with his job in the city. The silence felt heavy sometimes, like it had weight, like it could swallow her whole if she didn't keep moving, didn't keep herself distracted. So she did. She came home, dropped her backpack by the door, and made her way up to her room. Her room was a safe place, safe in the sense that it was hers. But even there, the loneliness crawled in, settling in the corners of the space. She had her books, her phone, her music, but nothing really to talk to, nothing to keep her company except the endless loop of thoughts that churned in her mind. She was 15, a little awkward, a little too quiet, and maybe that's why the reflection started talking to her. It began innocently enough. She was standing in front of her mirror, brushing her hair before bed. The light from her desk lamp made the room feel warm, like the flickering candles in an old movie. The reflection that looked back at her was the same as always. Nothing unusual. She liked her hair this way, the way it framed her face, curling just so around her shoulders. She wasn't the prettiest girl in school, not by a long shot, but in the mirror she was just enough. The girl she saw was the one she could be if people actually noticed her, not the one they made fun of, not the one who was invisible in the hallways. She smiled at herself, a soft, secret smile. It felt comforting, like a small piece of her that no one could take away. But then as she smiled, her reflection did something strange. It smiled too, but it wasn't exactly the same as hers. It was just a fraction of a second, too quick for her to understand at first. The reflection's smile was wider, almost too wide, a little more crooked, a little too perfect. Ellie stopped brushing her hair, staring at her reflection. Her own face was still and neutral now, but the girl in the mirror, her smile lingered for just a moment longer than it should have. Ellie's heart started to race. It was probably just the light, she thought. She turned away quickly, shaking her head. "Stop being weird," she whispered to herself. The next day, the reflection was back, and it smiled at her again. But this time Ellie noticed something else. As she leaned in closer to the mirror to fix her hair, the reflection blinked. But it wasn't in sync with her. Her own eyes stayed open, but the girl in the mirror blinked rapidly twice, as if she were in a hurry to close them. Ellie felt a chill run up her spine. She reached out, her fingers hovering just inches from the cool surface of the glass. She touched it, pressing her palm flat against the mirror. The girl in the mirror followed her movement. But when Ellie pulled her hand away, the reflection didn't follow immediately. It hesitated just for a second before it mirrored her movement. It wasn't normal. "Okay, I'm freaking myself out," Ellie muttered, backing away from the mirror. She shook her head again. "It's just a trick of the light, a trick of the tired mind." But later that evening it happened again. She was brushing her teeth, standing in front of the bathroom mirror this time, and the same thing occurred. Her reflection blinked out of sync, and this time, It wasn't just the smile that was different. The girl in the mirror wasn't mimicking her exact movements anymore. Ellie froze, toothpaste dripping from her chin. The reflection wasn't just smiling. No, it was grinning. An ugly, wide grin that stretched unnaturally across its face, like something wrong. Ellie's hands shook as she wiped the toothpaste from her lips, backing away from the mirror in a hurry. She could feel her pulse in her throat pounding against her skin. She didn't know what was happening, but she knew something was wrong. She had to get out of there. But it didn't stop. Every time Ellie went near the mirror, the girl in the glass was there, always a little more off than before. The smiling, the blinking, the way she watched Ellie like she was an audience to some sort of performance. Every time she looked away, she could feel those eyes in the reflection still on her, waiting, watching. At night, Ellie would lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering if it would happen again, if the girl would come back, if the mirror would start to show her the real face of the thing that was lurking just beyond the surface. But it always did. It always did. The worst part was when she was lying in bed, the moonlight creeping in through her window, casting long shadows across the floor. She heard something then, a soft noise, a whisper almost. It was coming from the bathroom, just down the hall. Ellie had gotten used to the idea that the girl in the mirror was just a trick of the light. She had to. It was the only way she could sleep at night. But the whisper was something else. It wasn't in her head. It was coming from the bathroom. And Ellie knew that it wasn't just the reflection anymore. The whispering grew, louder, closer. The voice was too soft at first, but soon it became clear. The girl in the mirror was calling her name. Ellie, Ellie, come here. Her heart pounded in her chest, and she didn't know if she could move. But the voice called to her, coaxing her, like an invitation to something she didn't understand, but was afraid to refuse. With shaky legs, she stood up, barely able to breathe. She walked toward the bathroom, her feet moving on their own accord. The door creaked open, and there it was, the mirror, gleaming in the dim light. The girl in the reflection was waiting, still smiling, but now the smile was wide, too wide, and the eyes were gleaming with something darker, something more dangerous. Come closer, the reflection whispered. I've been waiting for you. Ellie's stomach lurched. She wanted to run, but she couldn't. It wasn't her reflection anymore. It was something else entirely, and whatever it was ready to take her. In the dry heat of El Paso, the nights seemed to drag on longer than they should have. The city, cradled between the rugged mountains and the endless expanse of desert, always felt like it was holding its breath. It was the kind of place where you could feel something just out of sight, something waiting for you to look away. For Emily Torres, the waiting started the first night she moved into the old house on Seneca Street. She'd been too excited about the house, too desperate to leave behind the cramped apartment where she'd spent most of her childhood. This house was different. It was big, old, and somehow affordable. Her father had said it was a steal, that she'd have more space than she'd ever need. He didn't care that it was an old, creaking thing. It's perfect for you, Em. You've earned this. And so, at 21, she found herself alone in the house on Seneca Street, a place that should have been a fresh start. But something felt wrong. It wasn't anything she could put her finger on, nothing she could call a clear threat. It was just off. The air was thick with something unspoken, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, even when she was alone. The first night she stayed, it was just the usual sounds of an old house settling, creaks and groans from the floorboards, the wind tapping against the windows. But then, around 3 a.m, just as she was drifting into a deep sleep, there came a sound. A soft, distinct knock. It was coming from the closet. Soft at first, a rhythmic tapping, like someone was gently rapping their knuckles against the wooden door. Emily lay frozen, her eyes wide, staring at the ceiling. Was it just the house settling, or was it something else? She reached over to the nightstand, glancing at the clock on the wall. 3:33. a.m. The knock came again, louder this time, as though the thing on the other side was growing impatient. Emily's heart pounded in her chest. She pulled the covers higher, her fingers trembling as she gripped the edge of the blanket. The knocking came again, insistent, like the thing behind that door was desperate to get out. It stopped as suddenly as it had started. Emily held her breath, waiting for a sound. Anything. But there was only silence. The kind of silence that felt heavy, like it was pressing in on her, making the air feel too thick to breathe. She didn't know how long she lay there, staring at the closet door, but eventually exhaustion claimed her and she fell into a fitful sleep. The next morning, when the sunlight streamed through the curtains, Emily chalked it up to an overactive imagination. It had been a long day of unpacking. She'd probably just been too tired. But when the second night came and the knock came again, this time sharper, more insistent, Emily's nerves started to fray. She stayed in bed that night, staring at the closet door, waiting for the knock. It didn't come until exactly 3:33 a.m., a precise rhythmic tap-tap-tap that echoed through the room. Her heart raced as she held her breath. It was impossible. The knocking, that sound, it was real. It wasn't just in her head. But why? What could possibly be inside that closet? The next few nights followed the same pattern. Emily would fall asleep, only to be woken up at 3:33 a.m. by the soft knock. It never came earlier, never later, always at the same time. And it was always from the closet. One night, after the knock woke her, she couldn't take it anymore. She threw the covers off and stood up, her bare feet cold against the floorboards. She felt like she was moving through a dream, a place where nothing made sense. She walked toward the closet, her breath shallow and quick, her hand trembling as she reached for the handle. She had to know. She had to see what was making that sound. Her heart thudded in her chest as she turned the handle, the old wood groaning in protest. She pulled the door open. The closet was empty. There were no shoes, no clothes, no boxes stacked up in the corner. It was just bare, empty space, just the way it had been when she first moved in. She laughed, nervous, shaky. There was nothing in the closet. Of course there wasn't. But the knock came again, loud and clear from somewhere deep inside the walls, right beneath her feet. The sound echoed through her bones, cold and hollow. Tap, tap, tap. And then she heard it. A whisper. Low, rasping. Like something was trying to speak, but it couldn't form words. The voice was coming from somewhere behind the walls, somewhere, inside the very structure of the house. "Let me out," the voice croaked. "Please, let me out." Emily staggered back from the closet, her heart hammering in her chest. She slammed the door shut, her mind racing. She knew what she had to do. She had to leave. She had to get out of this house, out of this place. But when she turned to leave the room, the knock came again, louder this time, almost violent. Bang! Bang, bang! Her legs went weak and she fell to her knees, clutching her chest. She wasn't alone. She wasn't alone in this house, and whatever was inside the walls was waiting. Waiting for her to open the door again. Waiting for 3:33. The knocking grew more frantic, desperate, like something trapped inside the house. And then, just as quickly as it had started, the knocking stopped. The silence returned, and in the stillness, she could hear her breath, ragged and uneven. Emily didn't wait for the next night. She couldn't. She packed up what little she had, and before the first rays of dawn had even touched the horizon, she was gone. She never returned to the house on Seneca Street. The knocking had stopped, but she knew it was only for a moment. The thing inside that house in the walls still waited for someone else to come and open the door, and it would wait forever if it had to, until someone heard the knock at 3:33.